Hey, everybody. It's Michelle, and I am completely cup runneth over with joy because today I get to announce that Chasing the Swallow, Truth, Science, and Hope for Pediatric Feeding and Swallowing Disorders is 100% done and in publication, and you can check out your copy on Amazon. And the best part, if that book moves you, if it grows your evidence-based triangle to engage in interprofessional practice, to do the root cause analysis to why the child is presenting with the PFD, to then engage with the team to get that child to a point of healing so that the real growth can begin, then y'all check out speechtherapypd.com because they are gracious enough to entertain all of these amazing, joyful ideas. And they're currently carrying the book for 13.5 ASHA CEUs. So thank you for being a part of the First Bite journey that led to Chasing the Swallow. And be sure to check out speechtherapypd.com for the 13.5 ASHA CEUs that accompany it. Happy learning. Hi, folks, and welcome to First Bite, Fed, Fun, and Functional, a speech therapy podcast sponsored by speechtherapypd.com. I am your host on this nerd venture, Michelle Dawson, MS, CCC, SLP, CLC, the All Things Peds SLP. I am a colleague in the trenches of home health early intervention right there with you. I run my own private practice, Heartwood Speech Therapy, here in Coletown, South Carolina, and I guest lecture nationwide on best practices for early intervention for the medically complex and fragile child. First Bite's mission is short and sweet, to bring light, hope, knowledge, and joy to the pediatric clinician, parent, or advocate.
By way of a nerdy conversation, so there's plenty of laughter too.
In this podcast, we cover everything from AAC to breastfeeding,
ethics on how to run a private practice,
pediatric dysphagia to clinical supervision,
and all other topics in the world of pediatric speech pathology. Our goal is to bring evidence-based practice straight to you by interviewing subject matter experts.
To break down the communication barriers so that we can access the knowledge of their fields.
Or, as a close friend says, to build the bridge.
By bringing other professionals and experts in our field together, we hope to spark advocacy, joy, and passion for continuing to grow and advance care for our little ones.
Every fourth episode, I join in. I'm Erin Forward, MSP, CCC-SLP, the Yankee by way of Rochester, New York transplant who actually inspired this journey. I bring a different perspective, that of a newish clinician with experience in early intervention, pediatric acute care, and nonprofit pediatric outpatient settings.
So sit back, relax, and watch out for all our squirrels and enjoy this geeky gig brought to you by speechtherapypd.com.
All right, everybody. Hi. I am super excited about today. Also, we'll have to share the fun fiasco that happened just before we went to record. But we have none other than Brooke Beilman, MS, CCC, SLP. Y'all may have heard her from episode 4 of Understanding Dysphagia podcast, Head and Neck Cancer. And if you don't know Brooke, and you should know Brooke, Brooke is a full-time member of Tactile Medical's oncology team. She's a board member for the Dysphagia Outreach Project, which we love. And that was all of their board members and their volunteers were part of the Understanding Dysphagia podcast. And she lectures all over the place, like literally all over the place on best practices for treating dysphagia for individuals with head and neck cancer. But one of my favorite little known facts is that she's a puppy dog mom, and also that she has created a mentorship program called Servant Leader. Is that right, Brooke? Servant Leadership?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And it's a course that you can participate in because she understands how vital it is that we embrace not only evidence and evaluation and treatment of dysphagia, but also we have to lean in with grace and strength and be leaders in our field and in our workplace, locally, and all the way up to a national level. And I am so grateful that you're back. So, hi.
Hi, Michelle. It's good to talk to you again.
Yes. Folks, right before we began, she had a puppy scratching and wanting to play, and Bear thought he could take on the bidet with a Pikachu onesie. So there was chaos. And, oh my God. Bear and a bidet and a Pikachu onesie. That's not something that's going to come out of my head for a while. But, we had a slight delay to our start time, but here we are. So we made it. Yay. Okay. So for the folks that have yet to hear the head and neck cancer episode, because typically First Bite folks are peds people, but can you talk to us about how you became a speech pathologist and how you were drawn to that type of work as well as leadership?
Definitely. So I knew that I wanted to be a speech pathologist since I was about 15 years old. My grandma had a stroke when she was in her early 40s. So growing up, I only ever really saw her as having the disabilities that she had from that first stroke. And then, of course, as we are all probably familiar with, it's not uncommon for individuals to have additional strokes. So unfortunately, she did have additional strokes as her life went on. So she had aphasia, swallowing difficulties, and then eventually dementia. So looking back now, I can see ways in which we as a family and the therapy team could have done things a little bit differently. But during that time, I was very passionate about the care that she was getting and really wanting to improve her quality of life. And so I went to grad school. Well, I went to undergrad and then obviously grad school, knowing that I wanted to be a speech pathologist and work with adults, originally thinking I would work more with the neuro population up until one of my best friends and I in grad school, we heard that MD Anderson was having a laryngectomy conference. So on a whim, we road trip down from Missouri all the way to Texas to attend the conference. Just
on a whim.
Getaway. Yeah.
On a whim, we're just casually going to go learn about laryngectomies. Yeah, it's cool.
I think it was like a 14-hour drive or something crazy. But just seeing how integrated the speech pathology team with the physicians and helping to really make super crucial decisions in regards to surgery and the lymphatic system and how those two systems really work together, how the lymphatic system impacts swallow dysfunction or swallow function. And it was just very eye-opening and very cool to see the level of respect that the SLP team had. And I left saying, I want to do that. I want to build a program like that where we can really impact patients' lives. And it was definitely even something back then that was not well known. I mean, I think people knew about it, but to have a team that was that cohesive was something very, very cool to me that I wanted to help replicate. So my first job out of school, I did actually have the opportunity to do kind of a little bit of everything, which really helped me kind of further discover what I wanted to do, which was being a little bit more niche in the head and neck. So I was working in acute care, outpatient, and inpatient rehab. So I did get the neuro while also helping to build a head and neck cancer program. You asked about leadership. So how I got involved in leadership, I've always been involved in different organizations and opportunities to explore leadership. However, in the field of speech pathology, I think really it's been just a combination of my experiences over the years that have kind of led me to going out on my own and kind of doing my own leadership endeavor, if that makes sense. I've had a lot of really great mentors and people that I've connected with in the field that have helped mold me into who I am. And so I definitely give those people credit to helping build those leadership qualities in myself. As it relates to servant leadership, that was just something that came out of a need. So during the height of COVID and really seeing the financial ramifications and the lack of access to evidence-based practice, I'm sure we can all attest to, that's kind of where that stemmed from. But leadership's always been something very important to me. So I always try to seek out those opportunities, both in my personal and professional career, because I think leadership is something very important, and we can lead by example and make a really big impact, even by just the actions that we take on a daily basis.
Yes. Yes. And I have to say that I follow Brooke is on Instagram, and I follow her on Instagram, and she does lead by example in multiple facets of her life. And Instagram and social media in general can misinform you, and it can be a negative, scary, dark place, right? But what I have found is that even through social media, you focus on putting good in the universe, whether that be, an inspirational quote or I love when you do your weightlifting. I'm like, yeah, get it, you do it, yeah. But like, as I'm over here pretending that I'm airlifting air, so like, so, but just yes, you truly are the personification of a strong leader, and it puts joy in my heart. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I really look up to you and all the impact that you're making, and was just honestly honored to be interviewed last year. And now, like, I'm so thankful that we're friends. And some of the things that you have done, such as praying before the podcast, I've actually implemented that now. So my friend Kate Hayner and I did a presentation not too long ago, and we held hands and prayed before our presentation. So I really appreciate you and your mentorship, whether or not you even knew that you were doing it.
Now I'm crying. Yeah, nope, didn't. Just it's just what I do. It's what I do. Also, hashtag SLPs of faith. Boo. But yeah. Okay. All right. Before I see, now I'm all in my feels. Dadgummit. Okay. Take us from the top. What does leadership mean to you? And can you kind of walk us through some different leadership styles?
Yes. So there are many different leadership styles, kind of as you alluded to. For me, the one that resonates for me the most is servant leadership. So leading through service. And again, that kind of goes back to what you just mentioned, which is my faith. And you also mentioned my Instagram. So I do want to put that out there that I try to make my Instagram exactly how I am in real life, because being a leader and being authentic is messy. It's not perfect. It's not like social media sometimes lends us to think something is. So just being very authentic with the challenges and the successes and the collaborations, it's messy, but that's just how life is. So for me, the one that resonates the most is servant leadership. So really leading through service and serving others to be that leader. So that kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago about leading by example. So doing things for other people and really just letting your actions define you, not just saying words and then having nothing to back it up with. So that's really the one that resonates with me the most. And I think many SLPs, whether they know it or not, they are embodying servant leadership, because we serve in our jobs. No matter what setting you're in, you are serving your patients and their families, and you're being a servant leader on the interdisciplinary team. I think that's something that is so powerful, and that sometimes we forget that we can actually be a leader without the title, just literally in the actions that we take on a daily basis. I know a lot of people have been kind of experiencing burnout now for the past several years due to everything that's been going on. So I think that's part of what I've been trying to do, is help people get through that by just a shift in mindset and thinking about how can I embody being a servant leader, and even just small actions that I'm already doing every day to tweak that mindset, so that hopefully we can come from a place of service and gratitude that helps fill up our cup even while we're going through maybe some really challenging situations.
I have found that what I thought it meant to be a leader has evolved. When I first started out in the field, my leader was my director of rehab, right? Like that was my boss. And I have always associated early on in my career leadership being associated with the job title and with their income, right? Like the leader was the person who made the most money, the person that you reported to, the buck stops here kind of job, right? Mm-hmm. But what I have found is that doesn't always make a good leader, and that doesn't always mean that they're the leader on the team, right? I'm trying to be very diplomatic as I pick these words. Yeah. And also with that, I have found that sometimes when some individuals, when they get the title or get placed in those positions, they are ill equipped to actually lead various teams. But those are just my insights. Yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes people fall into leadership opportunities maybe by chance, or maybe they do pursue them and then realize that it's hard to be a leader. You have to be able to work with different personality types and different communication styles. And it's not that, I just think sometimes be ill-equipped to do that for various reasons. And so if you're not willing to be humble and admit that, hey, people that I'm working with, they may have different personality styles or they may have different values and beliefs than I do. If you aren't able to be authentic and be humble that I need to learn and to grow and always be in that position of authenticity, I think that's what really stifles the growth of someone in a quote unquote leadership role. Like you said, coming out of school, I always thought the director of rehab or the speech pathology lead or whoever it is, that was the leader. And it's not to say that that isn't a title of leadership. It definitely is. But I'm sure many people listening have experienced times where the person that's quote unquote the leader really isn't able to effectively lead. And so that's a big topic of challenge. I think many people, not even speech pathologists, just in general, people in the world experience. But what is so powerful and cool is that every one of us, no matter what our role or setting is, we all have the ability to be leaders, like I mentioned earlier, just in the actions that we take. And when people start to see you act in a certain way and embody those values and actions, that is contagious, right? So that positivity, that acting from a place of service and gratitude, that catches on like wildfire and people get excited about it. And it's so cool to see the dynamics change. And so I think that's something that I'm very passionate about encouraging those values. As you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I'm very passionate about evidence-based practice. And I know you are as well, Michelle. And that's what I use my Instagram platform to really promote. And a lot of speech pathologists around the country say that they have difficulty finding coworkers and teams that share that same passion and fire for evidence-based practice and going above and beyond for their patients. And I think that by allowing people the opportunity and the space to collaborate and connect with people who share that same fire and can help guide the direction, then those people are able to go back to their teams and be that person and start that wildfire within their team. Because it's not to say that the team itself wasn't passionate about evidence-based practice or going above and beyond, but it's easy to get into the lull of just the day-to-day, I'm clocking in and out. I lose the fire that I had when I came out of graduate school and like my why for doing this field. We've had several years now of stressful stuff going on. But even before that, even before the pandemic, what we do is very emotionally taxing. No matter what area of the field you're in, it is emotionally taxing. Our jobs can be physical. If you're doing things like manual therapy or, you're an acute care therapist and you run all over the hospital, like there's a lot of components to our job that are mentally, physically, and emotionally taxing. And so, I think that that's something that we have forgotten is to, one, give ourselves grace, but two, we can actually help bring that gratitude, service, and leadership to the teams that we work in. But part of that, I think, is just bringing people together to help raise us up to that level so that our cups are filled and we can go back and implement that. I know it's a little bit of a ramble, but hopefully you got the gist of what I was trying to get across there.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And I had so many different thoughts. I was trying to control my ADD in my head. So that's very difficult sometimes. So hang with me, guys. Okay. My first thought is when there are platforms, there are tools for you to discover your leadership style. And what I have found is that by discovering more about my own leadership style, I have been able to identify the leadership style of those around me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a huge fan of the ASHA Leadership Development Program. I did that several years ago. One of the greatest things I have done for myself professionally. It was a huge time commitment. It was a ton of work, but God, the tools that they gave me were profound. And like ASHA does have they have the year-long cohort, which I did, and Erin actually starts in just a couple of months, but they also have online tools under their just larger leadership umbrella on their website. But what I found, big surprise, is that my weakness as a leader is also my strength, and my leadership style is pace setting, right? So like I run 100 miles an hour all the time, but I've done that my entire life. Thank you, neurodiverse. I'm learning to speak positively about my ADD, ADHD, but like, dude, I go like a freaking Energizer bunny rabbit, and I know that. But that's exhausting for some people. And but for other people, it energizes them, right? So what I have to do is learn to, as I tell Goose Danger, our oldest, I got to learn to read the room. So I have to learn, who am I energizing by being my full self? And then whom do I need to not change myself, but be respectful that their love language, to go back to the 5 love languages, their love language for hearing feedback and for being part of a team is different. So I need to just make adjustments and modifications. It's kind of like, I compare this to like my patients. Some patients need, when we're doing feeding therapy, they need high arousal, and some patients need low arousal levels, right? Like they need sharp flavors, sharp smells, and some need more bland, right? So it's the same modifications I would do in a therapy session. I just do that when I'm part of a team. But I would not have known that about myself. I don't think I would have ever gotten the emotional intelligence had I not, like, with respect to that, how I lead, had I not partaken of those leadership styles and quizzes. Yeah. Also, there's ones where you can like be an animal. I always wanted to be the golden retriever leader. I'm not the golden retriever leader, but I just like golden retrievers. So like me.
A couple of things. One of my goals for this year is to further develop as a leader. So my current team that I'm on with Tactile, I have learned so much about leadership and emotional intelligence because I'm on the leadership team within the company. So I'm working with people all over the country, both within the company and within hospital systems. And so one of the things you touched on was kind of identifying that energy exchange and where people are at. And we can do that with improved communication styles. So I'm similar to you in the way that I'm very high energy, and I have a lot of stuff I want to share. And I usually talk 100 miles a minute. And that's
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll be interested because I'm in the ASHA leadership group this round to see if—
Wait, you are?
Yeah. I'm excited to see, do I truly identify as a servant leader? Because when you're describing yourself as a pace setter, I definitely have very similar traits to that. But I've been working on that this past year because, to your point, there are actually things we can do with our communication to better assess the person in front of us and what do they need and what is their need behind the need, because we're all coming from a different place. And sometimes, how people react to us has absolutely nothing to do with us. Something maybe that happened today or yesterday, and what is actually driving them. It could be something completely opposite than what we think, but we don't know unless we ask. And I feel like that's definitely something that I have really had to work on and learn is slowing down. My manager, he's very, very good at communication. I used to get a little bit intimidated talking to him. He'll laugh if he hears this, but I used to get a little bit intimidated talking to him because he is so good at this communication style that he would flip it on me to really make me look introspectively and assess what is it that I actually just said and where did that come from. And so it's very interesting. I feel like I've worked very hard on my ability to communicate and to be a better leader in that regard over the past year. So that's one of my goals this year, is just to continue to work on that emotional intelligence in that communication, because I do feel like a lot of people are in the speech world are similar to you and I, Michelle, in that we're high energy, we're going all over the place, but not everyone is like that. And so if we aren't meeting people where they're at, we can't actually help them. because we're just making assumptions in our head about something that we actually don't know if that is accurate or not.
Yes. One, congratulations for being the LDP thing. It's amazing. Huzzah. And two, I had this great quote come up. When you finally learn that a person's behavior has more to do with their internal struggle than it ever did with you, you learn grace.
Mm-hmm.
And it was apparently from Soul Sisters Memorial Foundation and the land of Facebook. So I don't know who to attribute the quote to, but my social media feed is full of fluffy, fat animals. Also, please take 2 seconds if you're not driving and go follow Round Boys on Instagram. It's just spherical shaped animals and it's great. But like, as everybody's like, oh, that's the best tip of the episode. So like, but we don't know the biases of the teams that we're leading and working with because we're not in their head. But we also don't know their hurts. We don't know their joys. We don't know the battles that they're dealing with. And having emotional intelligence and growing your emotional intelligence is absolutely fundamental to personal growth for you as a leader. I mean, that the ramifications for how it's going to impact your patient care, as well as you being part of the team, whether that be, hey, there's case in point, Erin's working on redoing the patient intake forms at her job, and she's part of a team doing that, right? And everybody's got their own things that they want on the patient intake forms. Sorry, Erin, this was just like fresh on my mind. But if she's coming at it from a PFD for a medically fragile child, the questions that she wants on the patient intake form are very different than the questions that somebody who's coming at it from seeking out a differential diagnosis, if it's a motor speech disorder or if it's a phonological processes and they're trying to tease that information out on their intake form, right? Mm-hmm. But you have to be able to have the crucial conversation. There is a book that I am reading. It's by Malcolm Gladwell. Do you know Malcolm Gladwell?
I've heard of his work, but I have not read any of his books yet.
I have read so very many of his books. Tipping Point is one of my favorites, but here it is. It's called Talking to Strangers. It's coming up. Talking to Strangers. What we should know about the people we don't know by Malcolm Gladwell. Oh, it's on sale. I paid like so much more money for this. Yes, but that book is key because yes, your team that you're working with, they're probably not strangers to you, but you don't know where being a leader, what actual rooms you're going to enter into. So for me, that's one of my, I sit on my exercise bike and pedal away and read Malcolm Gladwell, but I would recommend that one. Okay, sorry, squirrel.
No, that's okay. I think, one of the ways that we can improve our emotional intelligence is actually really getting to know ourselves. Because a lot of times we go through the motions and we do things, but the reason that I've grown so much this past year is because of the team that I'm on, but then a lot of the work that I've done in my personal life. So I've been through some, in my opinion, pretty challenging things since I graduated grad school it's been about 5 years ago. And
God, honey, you're so young and so wise. You have a very old, joyful soul. Sorry, I'm so proud of you. All right, continue.
But just, again, being, vulnerable and authentic with anyone listening, I went through a very traumatic divorce right after grad school. And I've always suffered from anxiety and, have panic attacks and other things. And so I have been in counseling and I go up see my counselor, typically once a week or bi-weekly, depending upon what's going on in my life. But that, I'm not going to lie, that sucked. Because I'm the type of person, I'm very type A. I have it, quote unquote, have it all together. And just really plowing through that time of my life. That's what I did. I just put my foot on the gas and did 100 things to just get through that. And I came out on the other side and I felt like I had made it through, quote unquote, again, until I realized I really hadn't, because I hadn't actually worked on the damage that had been done internally and how that affected me as a person and as a team member and as a leader. And so really, like I said, working with a counselor, I got a physician now that's she has a blend of like medicinal and pharmaceutical style of practice. And she's been awesome to talk to, and really leaning into the stuff that honestly sucked. Like there's no other good way to say it, but it sucked, right? Being able to embody that and sit in it. Some of the things that I did were I went through counseling, and I still have a counselor that I see. But then I went through yoga teacher training, which sounds kind of random, but in the practice of yoga, that's part of what the practice embodies is sitting in the challenge, sitting in the pain, because we try to run from that, right? We try to run from it, and we end up not really truly knowing ourselves. And so a lot of these experiences that at the time I was like, God, why is this happening to me? I think have actually helped me to get to where I am now. And so I definitely have still a lot of work to do and a lot of learning to do. Like I said, even just in this past year, I look back to where I was last year. And when my boss interviewed me, he asked me, what gets me out of bed in the morning? Like, what's my driver? And even just that question, like, really, like, it impacted me. That was in an interview. I was like, oh my gosh, Adam, he's my manager. But so now I feel like I could actually answer that question and I answered it to the best of my ability at the time, but now I feel like I'm in a very different position because I've read a lot of books. I'm in my office right now looking at one of them. It's called How to Do the Work. She's a psychologist. If you all are on Instagram, check her out. Her page is The Holistic Psychologist.
Wait, hang on. What is the book called? How to Do the Work?
Yeah. The psychologist on Instagram, her handle on Instagram is The Holistic Psychologist. So, changing the things that were on my feed to be more leadership focused and emotional intelligence and faith-based and all of those things. And honestly, like I said, really leaning into the stuff that sucked, because it's so much easier to be like, I'm just going to work and I'm not going to face this stuff. But it's when we really go internal that we learn about ourselves, and we are better able then to serve other people. And so, I don't know, that's something kind of random. I didn't really think I was going to share that on here, but I do think that that's really something that can help us develop as leaders when we get to know ourselves better, because it's easy to think that you know yourself. But for me personally, I was just running from things because it's easier to work and get my checklist done than to sit here and really be silent and be still and work through some of that stuff. So
I left my ex-husband after grad school was done, and son of a gun tried to kill me a couple times, but really good restraining order and divorce attorney and counselor. And you are absolutely correct. Y'all, we have to sit in the uncomfortable, and it's okay to sit in the uncomfortable. It's okay to admit, Michelle Linwood Dawson, that you may or may not feel like the broken toy on the shelf that nobody will ever want because you're the damaged goods. That was raw. It's like that bowl, that golden bowl from Japan, the pottery that they traditionally, if you broke a bowl, they would fuse it back together with gold. And I think that analogy is great because, yes, we are both women of faith, and it's through our cracks that His light can shine. And I say all of this, one, because there's somebody out there that needs to hear it. And if you're in a relationship that is unhealthy, abuse is abuse, whether it's verbal, if it's physical, if it's sexual, or if it's financial, that is abuse, right? Mm-hmm. But by sitting in the uncomfortable, to quote my mentor and chair over at FMU, Dr. Burns, that's where you grow. And what I have found is that the leaders in the room, y'all, they've all had that moment in their lives where they felt like the broken toy on the shelf. They felt like the shattered bowl on the floor. But the difference is they dusted it off, they put themselves together, and they moved through it and forward and they're stronger on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that you are naturally drawn to, the women, and I say women, but I mean, there are some men, but like the women that I'm drawn to for their leadership styles, they're the ones that are authentic, to use your word. And they're the ones that take time out to be active listeners, that take time out to hold the conversations that makes everybody else uncomfortable. That's how Bear says it, uncomfortable. I think that's cute. I'm not fixing that. Also, I am so proud of you. God, you are incredibly strong, and not just like deadlifting strong.
Laugh because you were making me cry for a minute there. Because I'm in a relationship now, and I have said that many times because I still feel that way, that I am quote unquote damaged goods. And this doesn't come from a speech standpoint, just like in a romantic relationship, right? And it's hard. It is hard to work through that and recognize that your past doesn't define you. It's your actions that you have, and they can start now. I look back on that person that went through that, and to your point, to turn something that was very challenging and difficult and not think of it as a negative thing. It was very hard, but it helped me get to where I am now. And during that period of time, I didn't share really the details, but it was pretty obvious that I was going through something pretty hard, because I don't know if anorexic is the correct term, but I lost almost 20 pounds. I was about 100 pounds, and it was pretty obvious in my pictures and Instagram stories. And I shared that I was going through some challenging stuff. Like, I lost everything. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a place to live. It was really crazy. But then that is where I learned that it's okay to ask for help. My family, my friends, my coworkers, and people in the speech pathology community. And it's okay to admit that not everything's okay. And then eventually you are going to be in a different position where you can open up your home and the things that you have to someone else. And it's interesting. One of my coworkers, because I don't live where my family lives, so I could have moved home, but I wanted to stay and keep my job and where I live now. So one of my coworkers took me in to live with her, and I told her, she said, one day you'll be able to pay this forward. And she said that because she had actually went through something where she needed to live with someone when she was about my age at the time. And I didn't think that time would come anytime soon, but just literally like a year later, a physical therapy student was in the area, and she had lost her place to live while she was doing an externship. So I was able to give her my apartment to live in. And so you never know how things are going to show up in your life, So it's really cool, but it's just being open to whatever happens, and really sitting back and being an observer is one thing I'm really trying to do, is active listening and being an observer and recognizing that not everything that happens is necessarily about me, but how can I, the only thing I can control is how I react to the things that happen. So it's kind of powerful, actually. It's powerful to realize that I can control how I react, and how I react can actually have a ripple effect throughout the community, which is pretty cool.
Okay. So somehow or another, this turned into this. We are sticking to our course objectives, folks, but also, wow, we needed this, right? We needed this. Okay. So there are women and men and folks listening that are in a position to help, right? So when you're in that position, and or they're in a position where they can volunteer their time. So this is how I view my tithing. I can volunteer my time, right? One of the things that I have done for the last couple of years is try to at our state association conference, Dr. Jackie Jones Brown, she is, I think, an associate professor or an assistant professor at South Carolina State University. She is, and I also think she's a preacher. She's a wonderful woman. Dr. Jackie created the Caring Square for SCCC for our state conferences, right? It's fantastic. And she modeled it off of an ASHA convention, right? But what we have done is, and how I have taken my leadership style and my volunteering and working with teams is making sure that that caring square, when it was my opportunity to be part of it, we supported the domestic violence shelter, which was actually kind of a hard sell because it made people uncomfortable, right? But what I look back on, and of all the caring squares that we have done and held, that one garnered some of the most donations of all of them. Because, right? But like, we all know someone who was there, or we were ourselves there, because statistically the rates are too freaking high. But also, random note, it is still a state law in the state of South Carolina that you can take your wife to the state grounds at the Capitol building and beat her with a 1-inch switch on the first Sunday of the month or something like that. And it's an antiquated law that clearly does not need to be repealed from the books, but are for real people, it's the 21st century. Yeah. Okay. I mean, nobody's done it, but the fact that it's still there is just what the hey? But rawr, rant, tiny soapbox. Okay, moving forward. All right, give me some of your favorite resources for learning more about leadership and how to hold conversations.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the holistic psychologist, she has a lot of really great resources, her books, her Instagram. I've read a lot of Brene Brown books. The Alter Ego Effect was one of probably the first books that I read that really helped me to recognize how I could step into an alter ego, if you will, to get into that place of confidence, to improve my speaking and my communication skills. I think actually surrounding yourself with people who push you to a higher level. So whether that be in your current job or if you have to seek mentors elsewhere, I have found a lot of mentors within the field of speech pathology just through social media. But now, my current team that I'm on, there are a lot of members of that team that really push me to that higher level. So the conversations that we're having are very positive and very goal oriented. And, when we're talking about a challenge, it's not in a negative, griping, gossipy way. I don't do that anymore. Or I try not to. I'm not perfect. But it's having conversations that really raise the bar and kind of push you to that level. And if you feel like you are having trouble finding those people, because it's definitely something that takes time. It takes time to build those relationships and seek out those people. But that's part of the reason that I created Servant Leadership, was to give people the opportunity to be in a group of people who share the same values of wanting to give back, of wanting to be leaders, and wanting to have evidence-based practice in the field of speech pathology. Because that was something that I've heard, since graduating, and even saw in grad school, of people just being cliquey and not including people and not sharing resources. And then you get out into the field, and it's there are those pockets of our field, right, where the price point of a course or of a think tank is thousands and thousands of dollars, or there are other groups that are maybe not as inclusive. And so that's kind of how Servant Leadership was created, because during the beginning of COVID, our field was not recognized as an essential field, right? So a lot of us were furloughed. I know I was furloughed. I was, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck, very close to it, because of just, we couldn't have our multiple jobs that we had. And there was a lot of people were furloughed. And so our CEU requirements were still the same. Many of us still wanted to collaborate. We still wanted to grow in leadership. But again, the price point of a lot of these courses, I understand from a business perspective. I understand some people are they're business people. I get it. But I think, again, I'm very passionate about leading by example and coming from a place of service. And so it was an idea that I had. And one of my best friends, Kate Hayner, I went to her. I was like, I really want to do this. Do you think you would help me? And so it was very much like I told her, we talked about it, and then like 2 weeks later, I was like, okay, let's do it, let's launch it. And it's really just snowballed from there. So it's a free group. It's currently we are enrolling right now. We ran it 7 times last year, I think. And so when we sat down and added up the hours, we did over 100 hours dedicated to this program. It was very, very cool. It was very cool to see the response. We had the first cohort, and then they went out and shared. We would share every week kind of like what we were talking about in the group on social media. And then, like I said, every enrollment, we've had more and more people. So it's been really cool because then those groups kind of stay together and it connects people across the country and actually people across the world. We've had SLPs from other parts of the world join that are tuning in at, 4 a.m. their time. It's super cool. And so the idea behind it is that it's a collaborative group is what I call it, where SLPs are coming together. And it's people from all aspects of the field. So people that are in schools or skilled nursing or acute care or
early intervention.
Yeah. And so it's really, and just being honest with the listeners, everybody gets in. As long as you fill out the application, everyone gets in. The reason that the application is so extensive and long is because we want to ensure that you are open to the time commitment, because it's a free group. And so we want people to take it seriously and show up, because if you aren't showing up, then those relationships can't form, those collaborations, those moments of vulnerability, they can't happen if you're not there. And so that's why the application is pretty extensive. It gets pretty personal, but we want people to recognize that it's a commitment. It's different than a financial commitment, but we want people to take it seriously. And so it's a 12-week program. Everyone meets once a week for 12 weeks. Our initial one is like goal setting and again, getting vulnerable and talking about the challenges we're experiencing. And then we have guest speakers from various aspects of the field. It's all volunteer based. So the only people that pay for anything are Kate and I, because we pay for the Zoom. That's it.
I love how you're holding a leadership program and that's free, and yet you are still paying for it. But I love that. So yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been really good. We did one just for graduate students last year. We ran that dual to the other one that was going on that was for people who hadn't graduated, and now we've kind of moved into the model of, we don't care if you're in grad school, if you've been out for 20 years, whatever, let's all just get together. And the grad students have said that that's been really helpful too, because they're hearing from people out in the field of what to expect, what challenges, how do I negotiate pay, how do I move up as a leader, how do I pursue higher education, all of these different things. So yeah, it's been really, really cool. This year, 2022, we are only going to host it once, and that goes back to the personal work, right? Of recognizing boundaries. Around the holidays this last year, my panic attacks just really spiraled out of control, that they were actually impacting my day-to-day life. And so again, going back to my manager, he always makes me look really introspectively. He really asked me to assess it. Well, where are you allocating your time? Where can you really kind of set some boundaries? So it's not that I don't love servant leadership. I 100% love it. But the back end of the stuff, it is very time consuming of, coordinating with speakers, getting the presentations together. We have a group, like a WhatsApp group for the people who participate. We have a Facebook group, and then we have the guest speakers. So we make sure everything is, that the citations are there, that the presentations are there, and that everyone in the group has access to all of the resources from the start all the way to infinity. And so we were making sure that we're answering people's questions with an evidence-based response, or if we don't know the answer, we're directing them to someone who does. So it's definitely something I love to do, but out of just, boundaries for myself and Kate, as we are trying to continue to work on ourselves. And then we also have full-time jobs. We're going to host it just one time this year and probably have it be a bigger size group than in the past. So that will be launching. We're going to do it in the fall. So just a kind of a little background, I always post about it on social media. So if you're interested in joining, the application will be up probably late summer.
Okay. When you were describing it, you were talking about challenges that folks would face and how y'all troubleshoot through, especially for the younger clinicians. when you're in the field, there's different challenges as you move through your career, right? So when you're first starting out, it's one of the challenges I have seen younger clinicians, especially CFs, struggle with is maybe the advice that they're given by their fully C'd supervisor or by the senior team member is that they want them to engage in non-evidence-based practice. Case in point, a dear friend, she's a phenomenal clinician. I mean, even now, like right out the gate, she's phenomenal, right? But her supervisors asked her to engage in non-speech oral motor exercises and chewing on plastic things in treatment of a child's pediatric feeding disorder and oral stage dysphagia, which we know from the literature is not evidence-based practice. I'll say that again for the people in the back, not evidence-based practice. But I have heard that so many times, right? And that's a huge challenge versus when we're older and you're going through that stage in your life, another challenge of, but you're a working mom, you're a working father, you're a working parent. And being able to lean in and say, no, I can't do this, or I still bring value to the team, even though I've cut back on my work hours because work-life balance, right? And then there's challenges when you get farther along in the career. My dad just hit graybeard status. It's when like you're basically just used for people picking your brains because you're at the end of your normal career, right? And it's a huge honor, but at the same time, it's like once you hit graybeard, you know, you're a figurehead sometimes, and that's a challenge in and of itself. So those are three very different case scenarios. But when folks are facing challenges like this with leadership or with wanting to address leadership, what recommendations do you have?
Yeah, so those are all really good examples, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to those. The first one that you mentioned about, you know, facing situations where people are encouraged to not utilize evidence-based practice. That's very, very common, right? I think that goes back to communication styles and a little bit of bravery, because if you're not someone who is confrontational or maybe an extrovert and outspoken, those can be very intimidating conversations to have. And I'm an extrovert, but even those conversations at the beginning of my career were very, very, very intimidating. And so I think that goes back to communication styles and discovering the person's need behind the need. So Michelle, you know, if you're the one instructing me to not use evidence-based practice, me getting my stuff together, so having the literature, having everything ready to go, and asking you, Michelle, would you be open to sitting down with me? I have a couple of topics I want to discuss with you about some of the practices we're implementing. And then, you know, if you agree to sit down with me, then saying, you know, whatever it is that we're talking about that's not evidence-based, and really approaching that from a place, again, of vulnerability, authenticity. And if you still push back on me and say, you know, that you're not going to do it, turning it on that person and making them expand. Well, why? Can you expand on that? Can you tell me a little bit more? And then that really will make that person sit back and discover, well, why is it that I'm not willing to do this? That's something in my current job that happens all the time, head and neck cancer, of people, you know, not wanting to do newer things that are supported by the literature, and telling patients, this is your new normal. You will never swallow again. Well, why? Why is that our current practice? And can we expand upon that? Can you tell me more about that? And a lot of times what we'll discover is there's a reason that can be fixed. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's process. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's manpower. And so when we find that pain point, then we can really identify how to move forward. Does this work in every situation? No, it doesn't. And so that's when, people at all stages of their career have to make that choice. Do I want to stay in this situation where my growth is stunted, where my ability to use gold standard practices are stunted, and recognizing that you're not going to be able to save the world, because we have big hearts and we want to save the world, but it's the person in front of me. It's what can I do in this moment on this day. And then when I can go home into that place of calm, then I can really uncover what is my next step going to be. And so that's why I always encourage people when you are interviewing to ask those questions. What is my opportunity for growth? What are your thoughts on implementing evidence-based practices and new processes and programs? Like really asking those hard questions, because that's going to help you uncover, is this a place that I want to be? Because if it's not, there's no point in pursuing it. Even if, again, you mentioned younger clinicians, a lot of younger clinicians, they have that job that they want to get. And I mean, I know I was raising my hand like, I'll clean the toilet if you give me a job where I'm going to be able to do acute care and maybe work with head and neck patients, But I think sometimes that eagerness can actually be a hindrance, because then we jump into something and we don't really investigate, or we feel like we should be begging for this position and not recognizing our worth and the value that we drive. So if you're, no matter what stage of your career that you're in, if you're interviewing, interview the person interviewing you. You are a valued person. You're a person first, and then you're a speech pathologist. And so I always think if you're interviewing someone else, you should be interviewing on personality, on their coachability, on their teamwork, all of those things, because skills you can teach. The other traits are much I think harder to develop. They take time. Not to say that they can't be taught, but if I have a clinician that's willing to participate in interdisciplinary collaboration and explore new evidence-based practices and really work with the team, that's huge, because then we can teach some of those other skills. So that's my advice for that scenario. And then you mentioned the work-life balance piece. If you have kids or you have family, or maybe you're trying to balance, like, where do I draw the line? Because a lot of us, we take our work home. Even if you walk out, you're thinking about that child that you saw this morning, or you're thinking about that adult that just initiated hospice. And that's hard. And I think, again, that comes with experience, but also recognizing your ability to set that boundary. And I'm not saying I'm perfect yet. I'm still obviously having a hard time with it, because I just was having those panic attacks back in the fall, because I think a lot of us we take the weight of the world on our shoulders and we try to fix it. So being able to ask for what you need. And like I said, I'm still learning. I went to my manager at that time and told him I didn't know if I was going to be able to continue in my role because of what I was experiencing. But me vocalizing what I needed, me thinking I was going to have to step down, his immediate response is, what can we do? What can we do to accommodate and to help you? Can you take a 3-week paid vacation? Can you not travel for 6 months? We will do anything to help you get through this time period. And
that's great leadership right there, is recognizing the humanity in your team. Sorry.
That's okay. No, it was very humbling to me. I cried. I cried to my boss 3 times. It was very humbling, and it was a very vulnerable time, right? I'm tearing up talking about it, because it was to have these panic attacks and not to have it impact your day-to-day function was very hard. And so to have that response from my manager and then from other team members of, support was huge. And not every team has that, right? And so, but I think if we don't ask, we don't know. Like I said, I was, again, it's a learning lesson for me, because I was thinking I'm not doing a good job because I'm having this happen. And I hid it. I hid it from a lot of people because I was embarrassed. But when I actually got vulnerable, said the response was overwhelmingly supportive and positive. So we don't know if we don't ask. But I think, hopefully people listening can take advice from my experience and set those boundaries before you get to that point of major burnout and some of these other health ramifications, and recognize, to your point, Michelle, earlier about energy levels and communication styles, everyone's different. So everyone's capacity is different, and that's okay. We're all different people. And so it's very important that we're really assessing that, because if we truly want to be leaders and give to our patients and give to the people around us, understanding how we function is very vital, and I think the foundation to that. Sorry, that was a very long monologue about that. But then the last one you mentioned is, how do we get if we're farther on in our career and we're kind of getting to that point where people are kind of picking our brain, and it's a very transition. I'm not at that point in my career. However, I've had people in servant leadership that are much farther along in their career than I am, that have done huge and amazing, impactful things. And some of the lessons that I've taken from them are never stop learning, never stop being involved. You can still have some of that energy and some of that project development and people development, right? Because if you have had those clinical experiences, but also the life experiences, you can help mold and mentor other people, not only on the clinical side, but on the personal development side. And that's really, really cool. So I don't know if those were helpful examples, but if anyone listening has any of those experiences and is wanting to be in a very positive and supportive group that's going to help you work through whatever it is that you are dealing with, servant leadership is that space. And like I said, we always leave the Facebook and the WhatsApp groups for each cohort open so that those groups can stay active and stay connected to one another. And there have been some really awesome friendships and partnerships and collaborations that have come out of servant leadership. Tons of people have gotten their dream job, so they recognize, hey, I'm not in the place where I can grow, and here's what I'm going to do. So it's something I'm very, very proud of. Not because of what Kate or I did, but what the community has done as a whole, because this wouldn't be a thing if people weren't identifying that, yes, this is something that we need, and let's come together and do it. So.
I love you. You're amazing. I'm just sitting here wow, just taking it all in. Okay. Folks, my big takeaway is that if you want to be a leader and if you want to affect change, seek to understand, do it with grace, do it with kindness, and learn to hold the conversations that are uncomfortable. And my Bible study keeps popping up with the words, be bold. I mean, and I flip-flop between different Bible studies. It's not the same book I'm reading every day, but also, Lord, I need to read it every day. But that's a conversation for another thing, and consistency is key. But it's okay to be bold, and it's okay to take up space, because as oftentimes society tells women to not do that. But own your muchness and take up space, be bold, be brave, lean in, do it with grace. So, man, that should be a bumper sticker, Brooke. That'd be a cool bumper sticker. Okay, Brooke, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Folks, go check out her Instagram account. I'm trying to pull it up because I have it right here. It is at Brooke Beilman, Beilman. And get your cup filled. And don't forget to follow us on First Bite Podcast on Instagram. Check us out on Facebook on the First Bite Podcast Facebook page. We love it when you slide over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review and with kind commentary. And y'all, here we are. Also, friendly reminder, we are roughly 6 weeks away, I believe, from the International Pediatric Feeding Disorder hosted by Feeding Matters. So make sure that y'all, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you register. I'll be at the pre-con because they asked me to host the pre-con talking about placing caregivers first, because we got to do that. So be sure to check that out. But Brooke, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I always love talking to you, Michelle. And like I said, you've definitely, whether or not you knew it, have been impactful in my life in many different ways. So I appreciate all that you're doing for our field and for me personally.
All the blessings, friend. Oh, now I'm crying again. Okay, hold on.
Feeding Matters guides system-wide changes by uniting caregivers, professionals, and community partners under the Pediatric Feeding Disorder Alliance. So what is this alliance? The Alliance is an open access collaborative community focused on achieving strategic goals within 3 focus areas: education, advocacy, and research. So who is the Alliance? It's you.
The Alliance is open to any person passionate about improving care for children with a pediatric feeding disorder. To date, 187 professionals, caregivers, and partners have joined the Alliance. You can join today by visiting the Feeding Matters website at www.feedingmatters.org. Click on PFD Alliance tab and sign up today. Change is possible when we work together. That's a wrap, folks. Once again, thank you for listening to First Bite, fed, fun, and functional. I am your humble but yet sassy host, Michelle Dawson, the All Things Peds SLP. This podcast is part of a course offered for continuing education through speechtherapypd.com. Please check out the website if you'd like to learn more about CEU opportunities for this episode, as well as the ones that are archived. And as always, remember, feed your mind, feed your soul, be kind, and feed those babies.
Hey, so it's Michelle Dawson here, and I need to lay out my disclosure statements. So if you ever wondered how bad my ADD, ADHD, and lack of sleep Monday through Monday actually is, well, here you go. These are my non-financial disclosure statements. I volunteer with Feeding Matters. I'm a former treasurer with the Council of State Association Presidents. I'm a past president with the South Carolina Speech Language Hearing Association. I am a current member of both ASHA and SCISHA. And for this year, for 2021, I volunteered for the Pediatric Feeding Disorder Planning Committee for the ASHA 2021 convention. My financial disclosures. All right, so I receive compensation for First Bite presentations as well as talking teletherapy and understanding dysphagia from speechtherapypd.com. I also receive royalties from speechtherapypd.com for ongoing webinars that I have on their website, as well as compensation from PESI Incorporate for a lecture course webinar that I have on their website as well. I am coordinator for clinical education and clinical assistant professor for the Masters of Speech Language Pathology program at Francis Marion University in Florence, South Carolina, for which I receive an annual salary. I also receive royalties from the sale of my book, Chasing the Swallow, Truth, Science, and Hope for Pediatric Feeding and Swallowing Disorders, that I self-published and is available on Amazon. And I do receive royalties from the accompanying 13.5-hour CEU for the book from speechtherapypd.com. So yeah, I stay pretty busy, but those are my financial and non-financial disclosures. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out. All right. Thanks, y'all. Bye.